Today in the pitch, we go large scale. Partnering with a versatile racking company can provide serious value for a solar EPC's business. Here to show us how is Steve Daniel, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Solar FlexRack. Well, thanks for joining us on the pitch today, Steve.
Hey, Chris, thanks so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting today.
Solar FlexRack, division of Northern State Metals, headquartered actually just down the road from me in Youngstown, Ohio. You guys really promote a diverse offering of solar racking systems and turnkey engineering services. Today, we wanted to dig in a little bit more into what that means exactly and show how an EPC can maybe build up its business by utilizing your services and partnering, a little bit more directly. So let's start just on the product side of things. What exactly does a diverse product offering even mean in this space?
Sure. Thanks for the question. And again, thanks for having me on, Chris. So the company's been functioning for over 10 years in the solar industry, and our parent company, Northern States Metals, has been in business for, I think, 47 years now. So we're a very bankable, well-trusted company in the industry. This kind of gives you a rundown of what the product line looks like. On the left, you'll see the G3X fixed tilt system. That's the flagship product for the company. We started marketing something similar to this about 10 years ago. As a result of work we were doing with First Solar, we were actually building clips for them, and they asked us to look at building an innovative racking solution. So we developed the unfolding rack at the time, which is kind of our claim to fame. It was pre-assembled in the factory and shipped out as a single unit. We still market that in certain markets, places where we have high labor rates, but most of it now is stick built. And the G3PX is probably the most popular one. It's available in portrait and in landscape. We probably have over 2 gigawatts of that installed. A few years ago, of course, we saw trackers really taking off in the marketplace. We decided to enter the tracker market, and we came up with our first product, which is the TDP. The TDP was the original tracker for us. It's driven by an actuator motor, and this is a system designed for difficult sites, so we can handle up to 60 modules per site per tracker on this product. It's still used quite extensively. We still market this product very successfully, and it has great applications, especially in northern climates where you have a lot of terrain. You want to have shorter tables. This is a great fit. A few years ago, we came out with a TDP 2.0 tracker. As you can see, that's driven by a slew drive, and this is used on utility scale projects. This will handle up to 90 modules per table. We're actually looking to extend it a bit now through some work we're doing with wind tunnel testing. This is really what we sell mostly of now into the marketplace on trackers. We also have developed a very robust ballasted systems, which we're using on landfills mostly in difficult sites where you can't drill. We probably have some of the largest, we know we have some of the largest ballasted projects installed in North America, in Maryland and Vermont and a few other places. This is a great practice for us. We have a precast system. We also have a very innovative cast-in-place system, which you can actually pour the concrete on site. And we've also delved into ground screws. This is a part of the market now that people are looking for ground screws, especially in the Northeast where there's lots of rock.
Can you demonstrate for me how this mix of systems can build my business exactly?
The benefit to our EPCs is that they can really have a one-stop shop with us. So we're driving for efficiencies across the whole engagement with a client. And that goes from, when we start to look at a project set, especially a portfolio, to how we assess the right solutions, how we deliver them, the contracting of those solutions, the actual execution of the contracts between our company and the EPC. So we strive to make that efficient across the whole horizon. We worked with a company who's doing 14 sites in Illinois, and they were a combination of fixed tilt, TDP, and TDP 2.0 trackers. So they used a full product line. We went through a contracts negotiation with them. Once the contracts were in place, it was very easy to execute each one of these projects as they came along. And we also brought a really strong services offering to that engagement too, because they needed to have somebody do the geotech work for them. We actually coordinated all the geotech reports. We actually sent people out to the sites. And once we actually delivered the products, we sent somebody out to train people on how to install both the trackers and the fixed tilt. So that's a great example of really simplifying the EPC's life.
Jumping then into that services, the turnkey services aspect of things, I feel like it's a term that gets thrown around a bit in this space. What are these services that we're talking about, and how far are you going into the development of the project?
Sure. Just in general, our motto is, we'd like to get involved as early as possible. So we mostly deal with EPCs, but now we're dealing more with developers and the IPPs. because they're in the initial phase of design. So we try to get involved very early and help them set the table as to say, this is the product you should be looking at. This is the kind of designs you should be looking at, a design for the system from day one. We don't just, throw out a quote willy-nilly and say, this is how you should, build the system. This is the size of it. This is the price. We actually engineer the system. So from day one, we have civil engineers, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, chemical engineer, believe it or not. We have geotech engineers, geologists. So there's full array of engineering services we bring to the initial analysis. So when we produce our first configuration and our first quotation, that's a buildable system. That is a system that the client could take probably to the bank and say, this is how we're going to configure the system. Now, the post may change because as we gain more information on geotech reports and from topography reports, we might modify the foundation design, but we work very iteratively with the client to do that. So by engaging early in a very methodical process, the EPCs and the developers really see a differentiator with us. They say, you folks are really taking our needs into account. Now, once the system's designed and we actually execute a contract with somebody, we have a field services team, which is comprised of 2 civil engineers, a geologist, and electrical engineer that actually go to the site and train the client. So we put somebody on site for a couple of days. We actually help them build the first system. We tear it down and build it again. They establish a one-to-one relationship with the project manager at the site. And that person on the field services team is now engaged with them throughout the whole process. And we actually started doing turnkey installations. So in certain situations, in certain markets where it makes sense, we'll actually do the installation. We'll work with a third-party installation company, and we'll bring our teams in. We'll assemble all the quotations from the installation company. We'll marry the 2 teams together again, and we'll actually manage that process for them. So that's not a huge percentage of the business, but in certain situations, in certain markets, that makes a lot of sense for us, and we still do that.
How often are these utilized? It all sounds like great to me, but I have no expertise in actually doing any of this. So I'd like someone to do it all. But I mean, are your customers, utilizing the full extent now? Is that like something you're actually seeing?
So a lot of what we just talked about, those are de facto on every single project. Upfront analysis, the geotech analysis. Maybe we don't do the geotech report, but we have our geotech engineer analyze every geotech report. We look at all of the topography reports. We make sure that we can take our layout and put it on the topography, and it's going to work well. During that process, we may go back and say, if you do a little bit of grading here, we can save you some money in the post, and we have a discussion on what's the most viable way of handling that project. Is it to grade, or is it to add longer posts? Then through the whole quotation process, it really does go through the mechanical, structural, civil, geotech engineer, and chemical engineer. They all take a look at that, and that's all in a process flow that's managed by the project engineer. So we have a project engineer tied to every salesperson, tied to a set of accounts. And what that does is it builds excellent relationships between our people and the client's people. So the engineers get to know each other, the PMs get to know each other, and we have constant interaction during the quoting process, right? Where these people are all engaging together and figuring out the best design, what's viable, what's going to stand up for 25 or 30 years, whatever the design cycle is. So all of that is de facto. That all happens for every single client. Now, if they do have a need for a geotech report or a pull test or, say, turnkey installations, then we offer those as kind of a la carte offering. All of those requests go to the right entities inside the company, and we kind of marry that all back together for a final proposal. The client gets that, and we can have a full view of what the project looks like. So again, we don't force people into buying services from us, but we offer them, and we found this works really well. People really appreciate it. Sometimes, if it's in a market where we won't do the turnkey installation, our field services team has built a cadre of, I'd say, maybe 20 really great installation companies in North America. So we might say, it's difficult to go in the Massachusetts market because it's union labor, but we know people will actually take their needs. We'll cook them up with maybe 1 or 2 installation partners. We'll actually gather the quotes for them, and open book, we'll just give it to the client and say you can work directly with the installation company. So they get the same level of service, but we may not take the paper on it, essentially.
So when I'm adding on these a la carte services, I'm paying you to do something that I could be doing. I'm kind of like offloading you. I'm just kind of saving time by doing this. Or is there another way I should be looking at it? I'm just wondering if there's other ways to quantify instead of just like, yeah, you pay me for a service and I basically now don't have to do it myself.
Yeah, it's a great question. We get asked that quite often, so it's certainly something we've dealt with before. Our drive is to have the lowest total cost of ownership for a client. So what we found over time is every client has a certain amount of talent inside. If you work with the hugest EPCs in the world, they honestly don't need these services. But they do appreciate that we have the intelligent people on the other side of the phone, speaking with them and consulting with them on how we would do the design. But in the DG space, in the small to medium utility space, we find there's a huge need for this talent, and they appreciate it. And we also really strive to work with our clients to understand what was the total cost of ownership when you worked with us versus somebody else. And one input is the price on the quote, is absolutely that, and everything that we've provided is in that quote. But at the end of the project, if things go extremely well and there was no delays in shipment and the material showed up on time and it was the right material and their crews were very smoothly implemented and engaged in the field and they didn't have any delays and the project goes smoothly and you go to turn it on and it works, there's a certain cost to that. Now, parallel that to some experiences they may have elsewhere where maybe the design wasn't correct and they had to do a change order or the material didn't show up on time or showed up and it was incorrect. There's a huge cost to that. And I always encourage my clients, and we've lost deals and I've gone back and said, you went with somebody else for a half a cent savings. Did you really save that half a penny? And invariably it's like, no, we didn't. We had trouble. And I said, can you estimate those costs? They say, no, it's really difficult to estimate mop-up costs, I call them, right? How did you mop up the project? How did you make it work effectively? And they say, it's really difficult to measure that. But to me, the proof is they keep coming back to us.
I would assume it maybe even just helps to have extra set of eyes to go over these things that can be, complicated, and you want to, mistakes cost more than,
yeah.
So I guess the question is, are you catching mistakes out there? Is that something that you feel like a part of your job is?
Yes, we do. Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, I think that people appreciate that. I've caught them on the initial. I still have a territory I run for the West, and I manage the team for the whole sales team. But I've looked at layouts and I've looked at the block that shows the modules, and I see there's a disparity. And we catch sometimes that early, just a minor change like that can really affect the whole design. So we've seen stuff as simple as that. We've seen just poor choices on layouts where they fail to optimize the land use, where we've come back and the civil engineer may look at this and say, there's a slight tweak we can make to the design that would make this more efficient and you can maybe get more megawatts or whatever. So we bring those to light. One of the biggest problems we see is kind of not really interpreting topography studies well. So we've implemented software, 3D software, where we can take our layouts, as I mentioned earlier, and put them on top of the topography and catch issues, right? So if you can catch those issues ahead of time, and really make sure you have an accurate grading plan, that's a huge value to the client. So we catch that a lot too. The other thing, believe it or not, is that geotech reports are not all created equal. We have situations where we've looked at geotech reports, which were done professionally, but they were more done for what you would look at for building a structure versus a solar structure. So we actually consult with our clients ahead of time and tell them, if you're going to get a geotech report, make sure it has these 10 aspects covered, right? So, but if they don't, we have geotech reports that are not very accurate and sometimes are not very useful for us. And then we value engineer everything. Every single system we look at, whether there's a big error or not, sometimes we just catch a nuance that can help the client out. We've done it many a times. And then sometimes it's just moving too fast, right? And things are getting dropped, and having the second set of many eyes, again, all the disciplines we have in the engineering team looking at these projects really brings benefit to the client. And the other thing I'd like to mention too, Chris, is that we, again, try to get involved as early as possible, right? If we get involved early in the process, we have opportunities to catch things really, really easily and really quickly.
I wanted to end on the most topical part of this is, how is this pitch that we've been going over today translated during the pandemic? Projects are obviously throughout this entire year being delayed, canceled, modules having to be swapped in and out at the last second. And it makes me think that a solid racking partnership could, be a benefit during this chaos. Am I right about that?
You are absolutely correct. I've been in the industry for 13 years, and I've seen lots of curveballs, sliders, and fastballs, and this year has just been so challenging. But what we found is that having a really solid process and engineering team has helped a lot of people get through these projects very efficiently and very quickly. Initially it was mostly supply chain issues, and then of course the permitting issues became an issue. And what it tended to do, Chris, is it compressed the schedules, right? People had to wait. An order we may have usually gotten in March came through in July or August, right? And then you have a lot of stuff going through the system. So we did a lot of things in the back end to make sure our supply chain for us was solid and that have not affected us. we had one project where the client, because of supply chain issues, had to use 2 different modules on the site. And they were from 2 different vendors, and they were completely different form factors. And so they didn't know what mix they were going to get. They couldn't tell us that it would be 50% one, 50 the other. So they came to us and said, is there a way you can help us? Because we need to get the racking on order now, and then just basically take what we get from the vendors on the module side. So we said, okay, this is a unique challenge. As you know, we pre-drill all the holes to line up perfectly with the module format. And so we went back to our engineers and said, is there a way to build a rail that can accommodate 2 modules? And we said, well, we've never had to do that. So went to the engineering team. We were very careful to make sure it was structurally sound, and we came back with one rail that could accommodate both modules. So it enabled the client to place an order with us that we got going. Then when the module mix came, it didn't really matter what they got, 50% of one or 70% of the other. And it really enabled them to be very efficient and get that done very quickly. Second example is the landfill we did in Massachusetts, in Beverly, Mass. You can tell I'm from Massachusetts because I talk funny. But that situation was really delayed by COVID. And this had all kinds of challenges. It had exposed rock around the landfill. It was a landfill project. The soil resistivity was very high. And it had sloping terrain. So a lot of issues had to be solved very quickly. And we really threw our engineering team at that. We figured out how to deal with the resistivity, because it can actually corrode the concrete if you have acidic soils. We had challenges with schedules, the crews being delayed, and we just worked very closely with them to make sure that project went smoothly.
Well, we talked a lot about how EPCs and developers out there can utilize Solar FlexRack to kind of grow their business. Just curious, I think it has done the same for you guys. Seems like you've grown a lot over the years.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we were initially a fixed tilt company. Now we're doing both fixed tilt and trackers. And we hit a milestone early this year when we've installed over 200 systems in North America. Trackers are now more than half of our annual business, and we feel we have a really well-balanced portfolio. And what we're seeing now is we started selling a lot of trackers, of course, like everybody else in the Southwest and the Southeast, but trackers are moving into the Northeast. And with our strong experience with dealing with frost and rock, we've shown that we have a real advantage in that marketplace. So we're having significant growth in the Northeast. We're going to more than double this year what we did the year before. And having a strong install base in other climates and other cold climates, including the Midwest, has really helped us there. So now we're installing in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Virginia. There's a case study on the website about the Virginia project called Danville. This is one we started off really with Navison, and it's one of the bigger ones that we've been done in the Northeast, and we're seeing a lot more demand for that right now. So we're capitalizing on that, as well as the demand we have elsewhere.
What is the range of project sizes that you're accommodating these days? I feel like you're now even doing more megawatts in chunks than you were previously.
We are doing larger projects. We have a very strong practice in the GG space. So those, the 1 to 20 megawatts. But now we've done a couple 100-megawatt projects, some 50s and some 70s. So we are definitely implementing larger systems. That's really due to some great strides we made on the supply chain side. We've actually become much more sophisticated on how we're sourcing our material. We're working with a number of Asian companies, suppliers, as well as North American suppliers, and that's enabled us to go after the larger projects, because price is king on the larger systems, of course. But as I mentioned earlier, when a large EPC or developer works with us, they may not need all of our services, but they really appreciate the people we have to support them. And if we can get the price in the right price range, we're winning more of those large projects now.
Well, it's all very interesting to me, and it just seems like the growth of the industry, the solar industry, can be seen in kind of the growth of Solar FlexRack to this point, and the job sizes you guys are taking on, the product mix you have, and it's pretty neat. And I definitely see how it could benefit customers out there. So anyway, thanks for taking the time to make the pitch today, Steve.
Chris, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If anybody needs any help, feel free to reach out to me. My email is sdaniel@solarflexrack.com. That's SDANIEL@solarflexrack.com. We can take care of your projects all the way from intake through commissioning, and we'd love to talk to you and see if we can help you out.